Well, a very good morning to you and welcome to our panel on Europe. Is it time to invest in Europe? That's the question that the five distinguished panelists will be addressing over the next hour and 15 minutes or so. Well, Europe, as I think everybody is aware, is a continent that won't take itself out of the news, and mostly for all of the worst reasons. Since the Greek debt crisis hit the news in 2009, the term pigs has entered the investment lexicon, although I think you'll notice a bit later on the slides, the Milken Institute has reversed that into GIPS. I think that's maybe just being a little bit politically correct. But pigs is the term that the newspapers and the commentators have all latched on. And those peripheral countries, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece and Spain, have, of course, to varying degrees, monopolized, I think, not only the headlines, but also investors' perceptions of Europe and its investment opportunities.
There's definitely a multi-speed Europe, and the question is how long this can go on. And the question is how far have we already gone that it can't be changed anyway? I mean, if you take, for instance, the example of Greece, of course it would be more convenient for Greece to become more competitive again if they would have the drachma. But didn't Germany and other countries go too far already so that they will have to live with a transfer union, which isn't too bad either? Because, I mean, if you look at places like, for instance, Italy, it has been this way forever. Italy, the north of Italy is one of the richest places in the world. The south is not. So Italy always had to live with the situation of a transfer union. So if there would be the political will in Europe to go such a route, then it wouldn't be so problematic at all. Problem is that Europe is, and maybe we can have a short look at slide number 21, please. If you look at Europe, you have this continent which basically stretches from Iceland to Turkey. You have a European Union which is 27 countries right now. Some more on the waiting list. You have Croatia, who will enter soon. Out of those 27 Euro nations, there are only 17 within the Euro land. So one currency, which is the first currency in history which doesn't have anything to do with one nation. So it's the currency of 17 nations, but with 28 parliaments behind that. So you have 27 national parliaments in the EU who think they can discuss issues on the euro, plus the European Parliament. And you don't have a government for this whole thing. And that's the story about it. So European don't elect a European Parliament which then has its, let's say, European president or European administration. And I think that's the main problem. But the thing is, that's not new. I mean, we have known this since the beginning of the whole story. And right now, all the spin goes into the direction now it's a real problem.
Well, the only legitimacy, of course, that I have is making money. So, thankfully, I made money. Now, with regard to Europe, Europe has, will Greece default? Well, it has. But all of Europe has defaulted. There are many stakeholders in the European project. There are financial creditors, and then there are the citizens of Europe. And remarkably, the political economy of Europe is such that the politicians chose to default on their spending obligations to their citizens in order to honor the pact with their financial creditors. And so, of course, what we're seeing is that as time moves on, the politicians are being rejected. So when I look at Europe, the greatest source of inspiration I have is fiction. We are about to see France elect Monsieur Hollande, 75% tax rate, set to reverse the reduction in the retirement age, set to massively expand the public sector. We have, elsewhere in Europe, we have the longest serving prime minister, is the prime minister of Luxembourg, Monsieur Juncker, who is on record as having said that when times get tough, you have to lie. Clarify. Would you invest, you would invest other people's money in Europe. My question to you is, would you invest your money in Europe?
Well, you obviously don't know a lot about my firm, and I don't know a lot about yours, but we have a lot of our own money in it, and I do. I think if you could put up slide 16 for a second, 'cause I think this is the point that I'm trying to make. What I'm saying here is that Europe, for many years, we can see the size of the banking system. It's a massive banking system vis-a-vis the size of the economy. We all know this. It's an over-levered financial system, and over the next 5 years plus, there's going to have to be a tremendous amount of deleveraging that occurs. Now, certainly, I would not, advocate going out and buying bank stocks to take advantage of this deleveraging. What I am saying, though, is in the breadth of the capital markets right now, the equity market capitalization of Europe in aggregate is around 9 to 10 trillion, compare that to U.S. of around 16 trillion. But when I see 62 trillion of financial assets, if you have long-dated capital, and with my money, all my chips in, I think there are opportunities to buy franchises as these brilliant European banks are having to sell things at exactly the wrong time. Okay. So that's my perspective. Well, how I look at Europe and how we look at Europe at Apollo today is, it's a slide like this where you have banks massively retrenching, and of the handful of countries that are doing well in Europe, some that are exporters, whether it's Germany or what's going on in Scandinavia, the reality is the banking system is changing, and banks are not taking as great a role extending credit. And there are a variety of senior secured corporate loans that one can invest in and make a large premium on a floating rate an asset. You can get a company like in Italy right now, a company called Wind Telecom. You can buy the senior debt of that company at 13%. And so there are pockets of opportunity in the corporate lending space in Europe as banks are pulling back from the marketplace. The other, and I sort of alluded to it earlier, is with the financial restructuring going on amongst banks in the UK and Spain and Germany, selling a variety of residential mortgage product and commercial mortgage product. There are opportunities as they are, after receiving state aid and having to actually, like in the UK, the asset protection scheme, Barclays and Lloyds, they have to sell a massive amount of assets in the next 24 to 36 months. And that disposition, there is not a natural home for those assets. Most mutual funds can't buy it because they're not equities that they want to sell. They're not doing rights offerings. Hedge funds, for the most perspective, learn the illiquidity asset liability mismatch of 08 and 09. So if you have long-term capital that's structured properly, there is a great opportunity in buying a lot of distressed pools of businesses. And you do so with an understanding, and one of the panelists said the massive defaults. The massive defaults right now in Ireland on consumer mortgages or residential mortgages is 12, 13%. It's a big number. But if you're buying mortgage pools at 30 and 40 cents on the dollar, that's priced in. And so that is really the point of the exercise, where you can try to find avenues that has been priced in.
And I just want to share a quote with you. Yesterday, in a couple of panels, including the lunchtime panel, we heard from the deputy chairman of the board of directors of China Investment Corporation, Gao Shiqing, and he was very diplomatic. But last November or October, Jin Lee Quinn, who is the chairman of the board of supervisors of the CIC, difference there, he said in an interview with UK television, he said the root cause of trouble in Europe is the overburdened welfare system built up since the Second World War in Europe, the sloth-inducing, indolence-inducing labour laws. He wasn't pulling his punches. People need to work a bit harder, they need to work a bit longer, and they should be more innovative, he said. But he also added the European countries enjoy a lot of advantages in science, technology, and managerial expertise. You just need to tap those advantages and you'll be back on your feet. If only it were that simple.
Anyway, the situation with politics in Europe, I think number one, the image of politicians has become so bad over there that it's really tough to find somebody to do the job. I mean, if you look at the French election, Mr. Sarkozy, by his people, by the French people, is the most hated president ever. Okay? That's what the polls say. And still, the other side can only come up with a gentleman who doesn't sweep him away in such a situation. So this should tell you something. And you have this problem in many countries. I don't want to elaborate too much about Austria. You have Mrs. Merkel, who is kind of quite standalone there. And you have a system where the problem really is every 4 years in 27 countries elections and more and more stronger populistic parties on the side. I mean, the democratic system in Europe can't be compared, of course, to here, where you have those 2 parties. You have things going on now in Europe where parties like the Pirates appear in Germany.
Pirate Party.
Pirate Party, yeah. So they have, I don't know if they have any concept, at least in some places they don't, but they get elected, they get into assemblies just because they're saying, here we are, and we are against everything. You have, first round in France tells you something, that who ended up 3rd there is quite extreme. And I think that's a real problem there, that number one, the personnel which is still willing to go into this profession in Europe is troubling me somehow, and that you don't have elections for the whole continent, that you don't have an election where Europe is voting for its parliament, and this parliament then decides for a European government, which would be a much better choice than having all those little national interests competing.
Where the truth is unpalatable to the political class. And that truth is that the scale and the magnitude of the problem is larger than their ability to respond, and it terrifies them. And again, that's why I would just countenance. I know we're in the Sunshine State and we're looking for opportunities, but the other thing is, in this room, we are wealthy, or we are the guardians of wealth. And the number one rule in terms of looking after wealth is preserving that wealth.